If you Google what HBS looks for in applicants, you'll probably get the same five answers from every consultant and every forum: leadership, impact, analytical skills, teamwork, and clear goals. And none of that is wrong, but it's not really useful either. It's like saying at a restaurant that you're looking for good food. After almost a full year at HBS, sitting through hundreds of case discussions, watching how sections are built, seeing who thrives and who struggles, going through recruiting, having breakdowns, and making friends, I can tell you what HBS is actually evaluating. And it's more specific and more interesting and more strategic than anything I've ever seen explained online. In my last video, I told you what not to do while applying. If you haven't watched that, go watch it first. I'll link it here. That video was the warning. This one is gonna be the blueprint. So, the single most important thing to understand about HBS admissions, and something that almost nobody is talking about, is that the AdCom is casting a section, not just ranking resumes. HBS is not ranking 10,000 applicants from best to worst and drawing a line at 950. That's not how it works. They're building 10 sections of approximately 95 people each, and each section needs to function as a self contained learning community for an entire year. Think of it like casting a film. The director doesn't just pick the 95 best actors, they pick a combination of actors that make the best ensemble. They need specific roles filled, they need chemistry, they need tension in the right places. So now, being in my section, I can see the design. We have the engineers, like me. We also have consultants and bankers, obviously. But we also have people from government and regulation. We have someone from the automotive industry. We have a history nut and aspiring politicians. We also have military veterans. We have nonprofit leaders. And we have people from countries that most of my classmates, including me, still cannot point to on a map. We also have artists and we have parents. My section alone will have 11 babies by the time second year starts. So I'm pretty sure we're winning the baby count across all sections. We also have someone who started an alcohol startup, sold it, and makes the best comments in class because they have actual cross functional operating experience that the rest of us have only read about in cases. And we have a teacher. I want to pause on that because I think teachers are one of the most underrepresented groups in MBA applicants, and they shouldn't be. The teacher in my class understands impact at a fundamental level. They have incredibly high emotional intelligence, they're quick to adapt and learn, they are humble, and they are obsessed with the question of how to make a difference in the world for the next generation. That's literally what the HBS mission statement is in human form. So if you're a teacher hearing this and thinking, I'm not an MBA candidate, you might actually be exactly what HBS is looking for. Now, here's why this matters strategically for your application. If HBS is casting, then your job is not to prove you're the best applicant. Your job is to make it clear what role you play in the ensemble. What perspective do you bring to the section that they can't get from anyone else? How will the case discussion change because you are in the room? In my strategy video, the one about how to hack Harvard admissions using Porter's 5 forces, I talk about being a complement to the student body. This is what I meant. You make the section more valuable by being the perspective they don't have. Now, here's something else I didn't expect to notice after a year, but is probably the most consistent quality I see across every single person in my section. They act with conviction. Not just confidence, conviction. There is a difference. Confidence is believing you are right. Conviction is picking a direction and committing to it even when you're not sure, because you've thought it through, but you're still willing to be wrong. Let me show you what conviction looks like versus the absence of it. In our case discussions, the comments that shift the entire room are never the one where someone hedges. Well, it could go either way. There are pros and cons to both sides. When this happens, the professor forces them to pick a side and defend it. One, because of course it's never just one thing, so picking two is the obvious safe choice. And two, it forces the student to find conviction and stand behind their choice. The best comments come from people who have a very clear point of view, who can defend it with reasoning, and are also willing to update it when someone else makes a better argument. That's conviction paired with humility. And it's incredibly rare. And that's why HBS optimizes for it. So, what does this mean for your essays? Pick a niche, not a niche industry, a niche impact. What specific problem do you care about? What change do you want to make? And why are you the person to make it? Don't hedge, take a position. Own it. And if you've changed your mind about something important in your life or career, write about that. Because the decision to change course requires more conviction than the decision to stay the course. One more thing I want to add here, and this relates to something I've mentioned in previous videos. HBS has a 2+2 program. For those who don't know, 2+2 is a deferred admissions program where you apply during the last year of your undergrad or full-time master's degree, and when you get admitted, you go work for 2 to 4 years before starting the MBA. Some of the people who came through the 2+2 applied without any work experience to write about. Their essays are entirely about personal impact, how they affected the people around them, the communities they were a part of, and the decisions they made about who they wanted to become. And those essays were strong enough to get them in. So that tells you something important. HBS is not just evaluating your professional impact. They're evaluating how you think about impact at a fundamental, personal level. If you don't have a flashy job, don't try to manufacture professional impact that isn't there. Write about the impact you've actually had on real people in your life. That's often more compelling anyways. Next, I want to talk about your pre-HBS job. Most admissions content talks about this in vague terms or dances around the topic or ranks jobs based on prestige, and while some schools might care, HBS doesn't. They care about the slope of your growth and the inflection points where you decided to change. I know people in my class who didn't get in the first time they applied. They applied again, and the second time they got in. What changed wasn't necessarily their resume, it was their reflection. HBS was waiting for them to develop conviction and self awareness before letting them in. And those people 100% deserve to be here. They honestly make the best comments in class because they've had more time to marinate on who they are and what they want. So if you're applying and your career path is unconventional or you've had setbacks, that's not a weakness. That's your story. The inflection point where you hit a wall and chose to grow is the most interesting part of your application. So lean into it. Now, a related question I get a lot. Does HBS care if you know what you want to do post MBA? And here's my honest answer. They care that you've thought about it, but they don't need you to have figured it out. They want a well-informed hypothesis. Like, I believe the robotics industry needs leaders who understand both the technology and the business of scaling it, and I want to be one of those leaders. I'm not sure yet whether that means starting something, joining as an operator, or working in venture capital, but I know the impact I want to have. That's a hypothesis. It shows you've done some thinking. It shows direction without false certainty. And it gives HBS the confidence that you'll use the 2 years productively, even if your plans evolve, which they most certainly will. The next portion of this video is important because I think it's genuinely under-discussed. I've never seen any consultant or forum talk about this, and it's one of the most important qualities that determines who thrives at HBS. Intellectual generosity is the ability to make the people around you smarter. In the classroom, it looks like someone who listens, like actually listens, and then synthesizes what other people have to say in a clearer, more useful framework. Not someone who has an untopical comment burning through their chest and blurts it out regardless of what was just said. Not someone who talks for 3 minutes when 30 seconds would have done, but someone who hears 3 different classmates make 3 separate points and say, I think what we're really debating here is X versus Y, and here's how I would think about it. That person doesn't just contribute, they elevate the entire discussion. And HBS is absolutely screening for this. Think about it from an admissions design perspective. If participation is 50% of your grade in most classes and there are 95 people in the room and each class is only 80 minutes, that means there's only room for maybe 30 to 45 comments per class. Every comment that wastes airtime is stealing from somebody else. So the quality bar isn't, did you talk? It's, did you make the room better by talking? Now, how do you show intellectual generosity in an application? This is tricky because the moment you say, I make people around me better, that sounds performative. So here's my advice: don't tell them, show them through the types of stories you choose. Instead of writing about a role where you had a title and description, which might just mean you did what was expected of you, write about a community impact you had or a personal project you drove. Something where you didn't have to do it. Something where you chose to lift others up because that's who you are, not because it was in your job description. The difference between I was the VP of this club and we organized 3 events and I noticed the first generation engineering students in my program had no one to ask about internships, so I started an informal mentoring group, is that the second one shows intellectual generosity. The first one shows that you had a title. And here's the thing: HBS isn't just looking for this quality in your essays, they're looking for it in your recommendation letters too. In my video about FERPA rights, I talked about how when I finally read my recommendation letters, I was blown away by how my recommenders colored my characteristics. They highlighted how I helped my colleagues, how I taught people things, and how I made the team better. I didn't ask them to write about that. They did it because that's what they genuinely observed. If your recommenders can independently confirm that you make the people around you better, that's an incredibly powerful signal. So pick recommenders who have seen you at your most generous, not just your most impressive. Okay, if I had to describe one style of thinking that HBS rewards most, not a background, not an industry, but an actual cognitive pattern, it's this. Can you dream big and tell me exactly how you'd execute? In our case discussions, this is the thing that separates a good comment from a great one. Anyone can say, oh, the company just needs to increase revenue. That's not an insight, that's an obvious direction. What HBS trains you to do, and what they're looking for evidence of in your application, is the ability to say, here's the specific 3-step plan for how I do it, here's why step number 2 is the bottleneck, and here's the risk I'd be most worried about. So dream big, but don't overlook exactly how. This is something I think engineers actually have a natural advantage with, by the way. Engineers are trained to take an abstract problem and break it into concrete, solvable steps. That's what HBS discussions demand. The people who struggle in the classroom are the ones who can identify problems but can't propose actionable solutions. The people who thrive are the ones who can zoom out to see the big picture and zoom back into the implementation details. So, in your essays, just don't talk about the impact you want to have, show that you've already taken steps to realize it. You don't need to have it all figured out. Just remember a hypothesis is fine, but show me that your brain naturally goes from vision to execution. That's the muscle HBS is training, and they want to see evidence that you already have the beginnings of it. Now, let me connect this back to something I said in section 2 about conviction. The person with conviction and execution ability, that's the person HBS wants because that person won't just talk about changing an industry, they'll actually do it. And HBS can point to them in 20 years and say, oh, we built that leader. And one more quality that nobody else discusses: discipline. Okay, this one's gonna sound a little dumb, but I'm dead serious. One quality I notice in virtually every person in my section and my overall class is that they are all physically fit. Now, before you think I'm saying HBS has a gym requirement, they don't. What I'm actually saying is that physical fitness is a proxy for discipline. And discipline is a proxy for the ability to execute under pressure, manage your time, maintain emotional resilience, and show up consistently over a long period of time. If someone is disciplined enough to maintain their health while managing a demanding career, that signals something about how they operate across all areas of their life. It's the same pattern as the dreamer-executor. They don't just want to be healthy, they have the discipline to actually do it. I don't think AdCom is looking at your gym selfies, but I do think the underlying qualities of discipline, the ability to commit to something hard and sustain it, shows up everywhere in a strong application. It shows up in the depth of your reflection. It shows up in the quality of your essays. It shows up in whether or not you took the time to tailor your HBS application or just copied it from another school. Discipline is the quiet foundation underneath everything else. So let me tie all of this together. Here are the 5 things HBS is actually evaluating. 1. What role do you play in the ensemble? Remember, they're casting a section, not ranking resumes. 2. Do you act with conviction? Not confidence, conviction, the willing to pick a direction, commit, and possibly be wrong. 3. What's your trajectory? They care about the slope of your growth and the moments where you chose to change. 4. Are you intellectually generous? Do you make the people around you smarter, not just yourself? And 5. Can you dream and execute? Vision without a plan is just a wish. HBS wants both. So now you know. The next video in the series is going to be about your application resume and how everything I've said up to this point gets thrown out the window and is a moot point. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. And if you're working on your application right now, drop your questions in the comments. I read and reply to every single one. Well, as long as our community is a manageable size. Anyway, until next time, bye guys.